Hello, Internet friends, and welcome to Keep the Game Moving. This week, I'm talking with a local GM in the Bay Area, Morgan Hua, who many of you will know well from KublaCon, from DundraCon, from Big Bad Con, Pacific Con, going to Conquests. Morgan and I have been going to cons together for a long time. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me here, Ezra.
So, what was your intro to being a GM?
My brother actually played D&D with his friends of the old white box D&D. And then he brought it home and asked, hey, you want to play this thing? And basically at that time, the only games we used to play were like chess, checkers, and squad leader.
That's a trio.
So he brought this thing called D&D, and I said, wow, this is great. So he was the GM and I played, and then soon after I asked my friends to play, right? And that was like maybe junior high or something like that. So that's like a long time ago.
And so were you always the GM?
When I was GMing for my friends most of the time, but then after a while, right, then one of them would want to GM something and they would GM, but I would be mostly the GM.
It's interesting. That is like the most common story where, like, you know, one person is kind of like, all right, I'm going to drive this forward. And then slowly other people start running games in their junior high to high school a group of friends. So you and I both share a love for Call of Cthulhu. It is a system that, you know, we've both been running through many different iterations. We're now in 7th edition, which personally I think is, I really like all the changes in 7th edition. I think they're roundly positive. What do you think is about?
It is my favorite right now. On the internet, there's still people arguing that they still love like 5th edition or even 3rd edition.
There are so few, like, you know, 2nd to 5th edition, there are just so few changes. You know, there were not large structural changes. 7th, I think, is an evolutionary step forward.
Yeah, I really like, well, the main change, which is sort of minor, but makes a big difference on the scenarios, is the luck, optional spending of luck. Pushing, actually in my games that I've run, pushing comes in sort of rarely, but every once in a while it happens. Even though it seems like a big deal, they would rather spend the luck than push and then fail and then...
See, you're not asking for enough luck rolls. I ask for luck rolls all the time, and so my players are more likely to push than they are to spend luck.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Well, in a long-term campaign.
Well, there is a death spiral that at a certain point they get down to single-digit luck, and you know that character's going to die.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're playing Pulp so that you get chances to get luck back.
Oh, yeah, and then Pulp, they never want to go down below 30. So
yeah. That's always the thing there. And so, you know, running horror games is sort of a, you know, it's an interesting place to be because it's really, I suggest, it's impossible to scare the player. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to scare the character.
Yeah.
And have the player get into that. So what have you found are some good strategies in terms of setting a tone and setting kind of an ethos around that?
I think the mechanics actually help scare, well, mechanics that threaten the character in turn scare the player. Like their heart rate would go up or adrenaline would go up. It's if a certain die roll is important, that's like life and death. Or even sometimes when you even, so I don't want, when I run my games, I don't want to be more of like the GM that's writing their novel when everybody's sitting there and listening to like 2 paragraphs of description. So I try to be more minimalistic, but then I still want to give enough mood and hints that something bad's happening. And that actually does bring up the heart rate a little. Like, I think my favorite bits is when you do some creepy stuff that has no mechanical effect, but then you say, well, what are you going to do? You want to go down to that basement? And everybody goes, no, I don't want to.
Weirdly, I have found that describing smells is highly effective. For some reason, smells are just really evocative and people react to them. I'm not sure.
I think I just read somewhere where most people are like it, most novels, it's always vision, right? But they always want to add another sense, like 1 or 2 more senses. They don't hit all 5 usually. They hit like 2 or 3 senses. So you always have the visual, but the problem is visual, you already see the really bad thing. So if you do visual, usually do something vague, like a dark shadow flits across, you know, a patch of light or something, or flits across your flashlight. So you may see that, but usually if you add some other sense that you know is bad or wrong, like a rotten smell, everybody already immediately comes to their thought, uh-oh, there's something dead down here.
Yeah.
So like the smell or even taste, right? Like something comes in your nostril and then, you know, like it's just gagging you or something. Then
how do you deal with, you know, there's a very common problem in Cthulhu games of, you know, someone just goes, oh, that's a deep one, you know, and I personally, I just make a bunch of weird stuff up and I don't use a lot of the mythos monsters, or I kind of describe them in ways that that sort of mess them up. You know, I always describe what their poor brains are trying to figure out what that thing was. So like, you know, there famously in my run of Masks, there was a thing that I described as a parrot, as like a unholy combination of a parrot and a shark, and that became like a thing they would fixate on. You know,
interesting, because some people do say that's what they do, but what's funny is I'm a visual person, so even when I run online, I have pictures I've gotten from Google, right? So I have like locations, props, handouts, they're all pictures. So actually, I actually just show them a picture of a deep one.
There's no artifice, you know. You're not high. That there's something, you know.
This is what you see. It's 10 feet from you.
And you know, if you've got a good group,
they don't metagame it. They don't.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
You know, you just say this thing slipped out from the side corridor. You don't know why, or it's right behind you. It's this. And they go, oh. You go, okay, what's your dex? Okay, let's.
It's one of the more like that. The metagame aspects of Cthulhu are interesting because the people that I'll use I statements as we're supposed to. The people that I want to play with are the people who are least likely to metagame.
Yeah.
But you know, conventions are so hit or miss that, you know, you end up with folks who.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So it was funny. I was running some games at, I think it was Gen Con. Yeah. So I was running a game at Gen Con, like 3 or 4 times, the same scenario. And I swore, like in one game, these guys played it before because they completely ignored all the clues, didn't follow any of the clue trails. At the end, they were ready to kill the big bad thing, and they were just like waiting for it. And I was wondering, wow, these guys are really either really lucky or they've played this before, and they're just seeing if they can kill the thing. It was really bizarre.
I ran Cthulhu for Chaosium at Gen Con a couple years ago, and like the table experiences were so wildly varying. You know, the first game I ran, the players were totally into my like, let's take this off the rails kind of thing, and it turned out in the end that one of the PCs was the villain of the scenario, like just because of a throwaway line that they'd made, and they like, yeah, I've been hypnotizing this person for years, and all of a sudden they're the bad guy. But then the second group were literal murder hobos. The scenario, the construct of the scenario was that you were working with the police, and they do something, and one of them goes, "We can't let the police know." And I, before I caught myself, as a good GM should, I said, "You are the police." It was a what? I mean, but that's part of running con games. Is, you know, you never know what you're gonna get at the table, and you know, you when you're running a game like Cthulhu, that can be a real challenge when you're trying to set a tone.
Yeah, that one table was a big mystery, but that, you know, most of the time I like Cthulhu because Call of Cthulhu because it's investigative plus action. Usually in a one-shot scenario, you can't have them just avoid everything and then that's it. There has to be a big payoff at the end, just like a movie, right? So there's always a big climax.
Yeah.
So you gotta, so one-shot scenarios, or like some of these modules you get that are all one-shots or two-shots, there's always some big climax where you meet something really bad and horrible, right? It's not like, oh, well, at the end, nothing happened. No, that doesn't happen. So the thing is, they're all really deadly. So at one point I was like stringing these together to a campaign, but I found out, oh my God, each one is sort of deadly. The chance of surviving more than 5 scenarios is really low.
Yeah, the one-shots are definitely created with a, you know, like this final fight is going to mess you up.
Yeah. Well, that one thing where these guys didn't want to investigate, they ignored all the clues and they just railroaded everything to the very end. It's like, I guess I sort of figured it out, and then I just let them do whatever they want to do, which is fine. Because it's like, oh, here's some clues in a safe. Nope, we're not interested. Here's this guy with some book. Nope, not interested. Here's this. Nope, not interested.
We're just going over there. We want to go to that place.
Yeah, we want to go there. Something's coming good. We're going to get our shotguns and we're going to go there and take care of business.
One of the more complex, I think, interplays of Call of Cthulhu are the sanity mechanics. And so, you know, there's been, I think, somewhat justified, there's been criticism of, you know, people who just sort of make sanity a second hit point stat.
Yeah.
And like, what are some of the ways that you use the sanity mechanic to elevate it from that?
So I use it like for more role-playing opportunities for the character. So instead of, where in the book they say, oh, roll, and then they go insane and then the GM takes over, I rarely do that. I actually ask, you know, I'll still have them roll like what the reaction is. Like if they faint, well, what can you do, right? But if they go into, you know, everything turns red and they want to kill everything mode, or you know, they have some sort of psychosis or something, I let them play it out, you know. So we roll it and they say, oh, this guy winds up being a murder hobo, right? Okay, I'll let them play those rounds of being a murder hobo. Or if they have a paranoia or a mania, we sometimes discuss it, like if it's appropriate for whatever showed up, we do that. Or make up something, or roll randomly on the chart. If it doesn't match, then pick something else, right?
Right. Yeah, I really enjoy tailoring it to what just happened. So like if they almost drowned, well, they don't want to go back in water, you know, that sort of thing. I've actually shorthanded it now. When somebody has the minor episode, I just ask them fight, flight, or flee.
Oh, that's the old-fashioned one, or actually Delta Green does that too.
Yeah. You know, just to keep it super simple. The funny thing is nobody ever chooses freeze. And I'm starting to think I should just randomize it and just be fight, flight, or freeze.
In one of the games I ran, I did another thing, which is pretty mean. So if it's like a group thing where multiple people had a minor bout of insanity, then I had them pick a card, fight, fight, or freeze. I threw them all in a cat, and had them draw randomly.
I like that.
The bad thing was at one point they started kibitzing. They say, fight? Okay, so they all threw fight in the hat. So then they started cheating. So
that's funny that they would do. That's awesome. That would be really, I like that idea. I mean, when it comes to horror games, the Cthulhu family, and I'm including Delta Green there, are kind of the big fish in the small pond.
And all these other guys too.
Yeah.
Right?
But what are some of your favorite systems that aren't Call of Cthulhu for creating a good horror vibe?
I love Dread.
Yeah.
So, but I don't use the Dread character system thing. I actually just use the mechanic of the Jenga tower and then homebrew my own thing for that.
Yeah. So Dread is an RPG where Jenga is the conflict resolution system. And essentially, if you say, I want to open a door, and the GM says, that'll be one pull. and if the tower falls, something terrible happens.
Well, generally you die.
Yes, yeah. In I think in standard Dread, that's actually codified that if the tower falls,
you're dead.
Yeah, I usually just go something terrible happens.
Oh no, I kill him and then I have a backup character.
Right. Dread, I think, is the one exception. Dread is the one game that can scare the player, not the character.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying the system, if you do the system right and match the system to it, then actually you can pair up the beats in the system plus the beats in the story so that they can sync up, right?
And I mean, I have not played another horror game where none of the players they were all standing away from the table. Nobody wanted to breathe. You know, that feeling only comes from a Dread game. Have you played the Fate Cthulhu?
I play tested it. There were some issues because Fate is more heroic. So the problem is, since Fate is a little more heroic, then you're playing more like Pulp Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think it definitely veers highly pulpy.
Yeah. So yeah, it goes very pulpy. And the play test I did, I haven't looked at the published version. The time travel component wasn't very strong. In that they use that just to send the characters back, and then they do the long way home. They actually just age through different decades. So I thought, oh, that's sort of weak sauce considering it's supposed to be sort of time travel and Cthulhu. I thought they would be jumping back and forth into different time periods, but apparently in the version we play tested,
that might have just been that scenario also. Who knows?
Yeah, so they just jump back in time and then do things and then look for junctures and then fix them, right?
I have to say, I actually had good luck with making a Cthulhu Fiasco set. It definitely was pulp and it definitely was dark humor, but it worked really well. I was pretty happy with it. Have you played any of the World of Darkness games or anything like that?
Yes. So I played in a campaign with Travis, and he had his own homebrew thing it's using World Darkness, but he built his own campaign. And it was sort of interesting. It was sort of like a nicer version of Delta Green, where you actually have psychologists and equipment and stuff, and they send you out on missions, and you solve them, and then you come home, and then they have, people to help you heal up and also fix you mentally.
So you were playing you weren't playing any of the monsters. Because the whole point of World of Darkness, like most of the World of Darkness, is you're a vampire. Or you're
not the monsters. Who are the humans of the World of Darkness system?
Right. That's a dangerous
place like hunters or hunters, right?
Right. That's a dangerous place to be. So one of the challenges, you and I have both run Masks of Nyarlathotep multiple times. The new version, the 2018 version, is fantastic. I think it's really great. But horror games often, even as we talked about, are better suited for one-shot games just because of, sort of the sense of climax and the mechanics and all that. So what was your experience running an epic campaign in Masks of Nyarlathotep?
I think Masks is actually less deadly than a one-shot because, like I said, a one-shot, you have to meet the big bad at the end. But Masks, you can slowly build it up because you start meeting maybe minions or minor creatures that you can defeat because they're doing their little tasks, right, on the side. And so then you find out about it and you stop them, right? And you're like, oh, then you find out, oh, this is connected to something bigger. So it's not as deadly, and I think you can survive longer. So I think in Masks, the first time I ran at Purist, and I think maybe 20 characters died.
Wow.
And then I ran it again with the companion, but I decided to do it sort of pulp. So I didn't do it pure pulp. I just did the double hit points, some pulp talents, but no gadgets, no...
mentalism.
No psychic powers, right? But just double hit points, and you can spend luck. But I got rid of the spend 30 and save your life thing, right? But still, you can spend points and you gain points faster. Death rate was half. It was like about 12 characters died.
Yeah, I gotta say, most of my runs, I mean, admittedly, so it's funny that I run horror games so much because I don't kill a lot of players. To me, like, player death needs to be narrative. I think, and that's just my own personal thing. I think there is definitely something to be said for wanton slaughter to like hammer home to these people that this is dangerous.
Well, I guess we should preface Masks when you run it. Sometimes, like when I ran, it's like a year and a half or 2 years of running. So losing 10 characters over maybe 24 months, 18 to 24 months, that's like one character a month. And either we're playing once every 2 weeks or once every week. It's not that bad. And usually it's not like you're losing one every month. It's usually they make some massive mistake, then you lose half the characters in one shot.
Right,
so it's not like you're losing a character every 2 weeks. You're losing nobody, and then suddenly like 3 characters. It all
goes to hell.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out how the information passes on. You know, the journal gets passed down.
Well, there's somebody that survives. I rarely do a TPK. So, and then like when I ran Masks with the double hit points, actually there was a TPA at the very last session. So 10 characters died, but 5 died at the very end. So really 5 made it all the way. Only 5 died all the way to that point.
I mean, I guess I should count in my tally, I should count ending the world because they did end the world once.
Yeah, that's a TPK.
Yeah.
So back to the I don't want to give them plot armor. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When they realize that plot armor, then they do stupid stuff. So when I run, and if you do stupid stuff, you get what you deserve.
Right, yeah, bad things are going to happen to you, yeah.
So it's not like I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to be nice, and this deep one swings at you, and oh, it only did 1 point. Oh, it swings at you again. Oh, it did another point. Like, no, you're going to walk up to a deep one. It's going to bite your head off.
Yeah. So how did you deal... did you lose any characters to sanity when you were running?
Actually, well, it's usually a cause and effect. Usually what happens is they meet something really bad. 2 or 3 characters go crazy. 1 character may just freeze. So usually you write that guy off, right? So 1 guy freezes.
Yeah, freezing is the worst choice. It's
some guy goes violent and may actually accidentally shoot another player, right? So then you lose another player character, and then the bad thing probably kills that guy. So then the frozen guy gets killed too, right? And then the other 1 or 2 survivors run away. So it's sort of hand in hand that, yeah, it's not insane all the way to 0, but insane enough that it's a temporary insanity that disables them in the worst point.
I actually had a couple characters who
go to 0.
Well, they retired to a sanatorium before then. They would, and some of them became backup characters then. You know, when somebody died or when somebody got too injured. Oh, look, I'm feeling much better now.
So I've never had anybody go down to 0, which is interesting because you're supposed to be totally out then.
Right.
In one series of linked campaigns, 1 character, I think, was down to 20 san, and they decided to put him in a sanitarium, so an asylum. So he's basically out. And then they rolled up a new character, so that character will probably never come back. So
right. And I mean, that to me is also, that's a big difference between, we've been interlacing, sort of talking about running campaigns versus running one-shots and that sort of thing, and kind of the differences. What do you see? What are some of the similarities? What do you bring? Or let me ask this a different way. Like, I feel like running one-shots has made me a better GM because I feel like in campaign games, there's a lot less, I'm going to do something crazy because I'm about to die and who cares, And so dealing with that in con games has really made me kind of a better, more resilient GM. Have you found parts of either one that kind of made you a better GM?
Well, when I started running games, a lot of my games were like 6 hours, 8 hours, and then start running online and actually doing lots of one-shots. actually, I played a number of one-shots where the GM was only running 3-hour games. I'm like, how can you run a 3-hour one-shot? Actually, now I'm running online. I'm doing 3-hour sessions. So either it's a one-shot in 3 hours or it's a 2-shot. So 3 hours. So I've been able to speed up my games, actually. So what's funny is running lots of one-shots, you can speed up the game and actually finish it in 3 hours.
So are you running, when you're running Cthulhu Online, are you running Roll20? Are you doing Theater of the Mind? What are you?
Roll20, but it's mostly Theater of the Mind, except for I have pictures, like I said. And then if there's a map, typically, if it's a place they know, I show the whole map. Otherwise, I actually put up the GM map, but then use the Fog of War and hide sections and let them walk through different rooms.
Right.
But there's no character counters. They just tell me front door, okay. And I review the front door room and I say, this is what's in the room, and they can see the other doors. So you want to go left or right, and they tell me.
So you're not doing like tactical combat?
No. Just to show them the rooms and things like that. The size of the rooms, the shape, how they're oriented. Because what I hate is, like, you know, that old game where you used to go left, right in the caverns and it's in the dark and then you get eaten by the grue.
Right. Yeah,
sometimes in Theater of the Mind, when you describe a house, it feels like that. And that's not, sometimes there is some truth to it if it's a house you've never been into before. But a lot of times you can sort of know, okay, if I go here, there's the kitchen, the bathroom's generally near there because the plumbing is like that, and there's a bedroom there, right? You sort of have a feel. And the route, usually, unless it's a giant sprawling mansion, you have a good idea how to get out the front door.
Right, right. Yeah, I have found that, you know, tactical combat in Call of Cthulhu doesn't add a whole lot.
Well, the one that did work was I was running 4 hours to Reno, which was the one I ran at Gen Con that I ran 4 times. I have a whole map of the train, and that's useful because it's pulp, it's cowboys, and there's lots of shooting, so it's sort of good to see where everybody is. So that worked out. But typically, normal Cthulhu, yeah, I don't do a tactical map.
Yeah. Yeah, it tends to be very much a sort of, what do you want to do? How are you going to do it? You know, that sort of thing. We also had the, we had the experience, you and I ran a game together.
Yeah.
At a con, which was, for me, a really interesting experience because we're very different GMs.
Exactly. Yeah, that was interesting.
And it was fun to sort of synthesize our styles. To set the stage for this, this was a multi-stage game that was, don't listen, Matt, Star Wars.
With a serial numbers filed off. Called,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Singularity
we were attacking the Don't Call It a Death Star, and every team had a job. And because when one time we ran, we didn't have enough players, we combined teams. And so, you know, we took Morgan's part of it and my part of it, which was good because this thing was paper thin. Like this was a con game. You know,
we had 2 pages for a 4-hour game.
Yeah, this was a con game and it was a demo game. So I don't want to be too hard on it because it did what it was supposed to do, which was introduce people to the cipher system.
Yeah, the system and the characters and what you can do with it.
Yeah,
but people had fun. They had fun.
That is the bottom line. You know, we ran it, I think 3 times, and people
more than that. I think 5 times.
Did we run it?
We ran it at Game Castle, and then we ran it. Test ran it ourselves.
Yeah, and then
we ran it 3 or 4 times at the convention.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think you're right because we did it at Dundra Kubla and Big Bad. I think so. Those were that's right. It was, but you know, the first test run we did. Who knew that Morgan and I, for some reason, Morgan and I were just drawn to each other because the first test run we did, we were all at separate tables, and Morgan and I mixed our tables up, and we were like, they ran into my area and, you know, this sort of thing. And we were loving it.
Because the scenario was so thin, they finished my mission early, so they didn't know what to do. So, so I think I talked to Ezra and I said, well, have they finished yours yet? No. Okay. And then these guys run to the other team.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then we had a big old table, and that was the first time we co-GM'd the thing. And then the second time we had a smaller group, but it was that very same feeling. And one of the neat parts for me was the give and take when I would take a step back and you would take the table, and when you would do that, and it felt very natural. There were just points when you would come in and I would go out, and that sort of thing.
And what's cool is the last thing you want to do as a GM is talk to yourself. So if you have two NPCs and they run to each other, the last thing you want to do is to do two different voices.
My head's that way.
And then talk to yourself. But what's funny is in part of it, there were like two stormtroopers. Oh wait, they weren't stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Something like a stormtrooper. They were in an elevator and we were able to talk to each other.
Yeah. And I thought the other thing that I thought was interesting was, in that moment, you were much more interested in, or you were better in the mechanics of the system, and I was kind of in the what about this sort of school, and the two really kind of went together really well.
Yeah.
I thought that was.
Yes, I'm talking to a Iron GM winner who didn't read the system. I'm an improv. I like to make up games. That's my stick. But you did win the Iron GM thing.
Have you co-GM'd with other folks?
No, so I
haven't either.
The first time. I always thought that Shannon and I should co-GM something one day, but we haven't done anything.
Bill Lee has done a little bit of it, and I've talked with him about that.
He did with Gil.
Right? Yeah. He ran that game, and that was a much heavier lift than our like little shtick. That was
and I've seen John and
I've played in that game. Yeah. The house game.
Yeah, so they co-GM. One is the presenter, and the other one sort of takes notes and gives advice. I think that's a little less interesting. I think how we interacted was better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so in the game that John and that they ran, that game is basically a LARP, and LARP GMing is kind of a different thing where, I always say my biggest problem with LARPs is that the most important stat or resource in those games is GM time. Like you going to the GM and getting stuff. And so the more GMs you can have, the better. And so they were doing a good job of splitting stuff up and kind of, all right, these players are going to deal with this.
Party, then one GM takes care of one split party, right?
Yeah. I would love to do more things with GMs that are kind of what Bill and Gil did, where it was two separate tables and they were sort of interacting and that sort of thing. I think there's a lot of fun stuff that could happen with that, with the interactions that, we kind of scratched the surface on with the assault on whatever it was.
Yeah, I think if you do have split GMs and split tables, the issue is coordinating the time. Yeah. So sometimes you always want things to affect the other team, but then there may be a time slip, right? Like one team may be ahead of the other team by 2 hours game time or something like that, right?
That is the real challenge there. Is it, so we've mainly been talking about published scenarios. Like a lot of times when I'm running big stuff, I will take a published scenario and then I'll kind of warp it and I'll, add stuff in and kind of go where the players go. And so and I think every GM does that. Like your version of Masks is totally different than my version of Masks, and every playthrough of Masks is different, which is one of the beauties of it.
There's some key similarities because of how it's done, but everything's slightly different, right?
Right. And so do you when you create a scenario for something, how much flexibility do you kind of write into that?
That's way different. When I run a published scenario, I usually follow it and then modify things, or things that don't make sense, you fix it, or add extra clues, or add extra clue trails and things like that. So if I ran my own campaign, which I've done before, I actually have the players create their characters first. I run one scenario I don't tailor too much, and then see how the characters act. And then I go home and I take my little spreadsheet or notebook and write down the characters and what I observed, and I start creating character arcs for them.
Oh, that's really neat. I like that idea.
And then the adventures that follow are based on things I want to happen to those characters. So when I run my games, I don't want to do the equal screen time for everybody. So at a convention, you do that because you want everybody to have equal fun, right? You don't want to give one guy 3 hours of the game and then the other players 15 minutes each, right? You want to slice it up equally, right? So give everybody enough screen time so that they're happy and they have enough fun. So my idea is more like Star Trek, where you have a Kirk episode, a Spock episode, a Bones episode, a Scotty episode. So, but I don't tell them whose episode it is. So what I do is I go, okay, I already had this character's episode last week, so that guy had a little bit more screen time, or the story was focused on that person's issues and things like that, or how I want the character to grow. The next episode would be another character's, but I don't tell them whose it is. So, they just do it, and then, things happen. So that's how I build my campaigns. And then usually I have an idea for the ending, and then they sort of go that way. Right.
I really like that kind of intermezzo adventure of just, now I'm going to, let's all figure out how we play together. And then from that'll also tell you, like, is this going to be a dungeon crawl? Is this going to be an exploration game? What are we where do we want to head with this? I think so that almost kind of becomes a session zero in a way.
Almost, except for you play. You bring your characters. I don't care what you've rolled up. We bring your characters, we play, and then, I've taken notes. I have copies of the character sheets. I go, okay, there's this guy who's a sniper. Okay, what's about this character? And then you think about it, right? And what's in their background? How does this character need to grow? Or like one character's sniper that's totally not empathetic. So I go, well, what happened? The brain goes like, what can I do to this guy?
Yeah.
This character.
How much of that is done with the players? Like how collaborative is that experience?
Well, I like to surprise them. So actually I don't take their input other than their actions in the first group. And then as we play, right, their reaction informs me.
Interesting.
I didn't tell them this is your episode.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
Because they have a mission, right? So they have a mission, they're going to complete it. And then I don't tell them that was your episode. I see how that character grew or didn't grow, right? How that character the character growth or not non-growth based on what happened to that episode or scenario. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's where they are. Okay.
And that's really interesting. I run a campaign on stream, and that's a very different animal because we almost we do that, but there are times like with the end of Masks where we'll just have a production meeting and we'll be like, all right, there are 5 episodes left in this.
Can we finish it by then?
We've decided. So what is one thing that has to happen for your character before then, and we'll literally like say, okay, here's where we're going to slot that in. And you almost like click it in and then.
But that's almost like a production of a movie or something, right?
Right.
Where you have to get it done.
Yeah. It's a different experience, but
I think there's different needs, and that's why you have to do it that way. Mine, it's almost like, well, it's open-ended, right? It's just a campaign with no number of episodes prepaid for. Right. So we just let it run, right?
Right. It goes as long as it goes.
Yeah, it goes as long as it goes.
And I mean that's true of the stream game, but there's also a feeling of, I mean, look, I could do a whole episode on running the weirdness of running games on stream. Like as characters become fan favorites,
you can't kill them.
It's a really interesting thing. I mean, it's hard because some of it is also based on the player. The player is so attached to this character that they've come to love, and I'm not gonna. I'm speaking only in the abstract. I'm not speaking of any specific player here. I want to be clear. But like, I don't know how should I phrase this in the way to be as unspecific as possible. It's impossible for the players to have sort of fans telling them, "Oh, this character's so," it's impossible not to listen to that.
Yeah, so there's a feedback. They hear that they love this, so you got to do more of X.
Yeah,
or getting...
we can't have anything bad happen to Bob because Bob is everybody's favorite. That sort of thing, which automatically in my head means I want to kill Bob. And that's why I'm a bad person.
So back to Masks, I did notice that every time a character dies, in my experience, there's a 50-50 chance the player won't come back with a new character and they just disappear.
Interesting. Because you were running online, right?
Yeah, mainly online, and then some was actually face-to-face. So some people actually just like, yeah, I'm busy now, I can't play.
I like my guy too much. That's funny.
Like, my character died. I don't want to play anymore.
Wow. Well, that's
that same thing. Got really attached to the character. Character dies, and they get a little mopey, and then they decide they don't want to play anymore. That's the danger of Call of Cthulhu. I mean, characters are squishy.
Yeah. One of my favorite mechanics that perpetuates the idea of the game. In the new version of Paranoia, your character sheet is a dry erase board, which I think is just a perfect manifestation. I always joke. So as character creation is part of the game, and as you're making your character, I always say here's your character sheet. It's a dry erase board that is no statement on the permanence of this character. But I think it does a great job of telling you what to expect right from the start, because it's true. A lot of people put a lot into their characters, and they've got reams of backstory. I'm not a big fan of
I'm not a fan
character backstory because that's all happening off stage, and it unless you can find a way to bring it into the story.
So that's my issue with some of the different systems with issue that's collaborative storytelling. How can you do a murder mystery if you're all agreeing who the murderer is? Right?
Oh, I'm going to disagree with you here.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think so. I love that. I love. What I don't like is the person who has a novel they've written about their character, and you say and you say something and then we meet your sister. You're like, no, I don't have a sister.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
I have 3 brothers.
Yeah,
here's the whole thing,
Yeah.
But so I actually ran a Fate game that was all about a murder mystery in the Vatican, and somebody had killed the Pope, and then they were all cardinals who were going to become Pope. And I ran it, I think, 3 times, and at a certain point in the game, about 3 hours in, I would pick somebody and I would pass them a note that said,
saying you're the murderer.
Did you know? I'd pass them a note asking if they killed the Pope.
Oh. And
they would answer yes or no. And that would be the person that killed the Pope.
Oh, I like that.
Because then it gives them a little agency, but B, it's still sort of, okay, I can tell you're a terrible person.
Else. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually like letting the players decide who the bad guy, who I think that can be a really fun thing. Again, for a one shot, doesn't work so well in a campaign. That's a hard, doing traitor stuff in a campaign is usually a bad idea.
It's very tough. Yeah.
Yeah. It's usually hard. So taking Call of Cthulhu out of it, what is your favorite system to run? What do you like to run that isn't Cthulhu?
I like Timewatch.
Oh, neat. Give people the elevator pitch on Timewatch.
Basically, you're time patrol. Somebody's messed up the time stream, and your team is sent to that time to figure out what's going on, and then you have to fix it. The only issue is if the bad guy is just a regular guy, it's too easy, right? So of course all your opponents are also time travelers. So they've messed up something in time that's rippled out and messed up the future. So there's two major bad guys. One are intelligent dinosaurs from the past, and one are intelligent cockroaches from the future after the apocalypse. So the dinosaurs want to push out their extinction so that they're and then in between's humanity. So the dinosaurs are trying to live longer and squeeze out humanity, and the cockroaches want to start the apocalypse early so that they can be around longer. So both of these races are trying to squeeze out humanity.
So and what are the mechanics? Is it powered by the apocalypse?
No. It's a oh my god, I don't remember. It's like Gumshoe. It's Gumshoe.
Oh, okay, all right.
But spending points is like amazing. Like you spend points to do crazy things. Like I'm gonna spend points to leave a clue for myself underneath the rock.
Nice. To leave my future self a clue.
Yeah, you could do things like that. Or I'll travel back in time and start digging a tunnel, or hiring some natives to start digging a tunnel, and we're going to plant a nuclear bomb down there, so that now when you're like doing something, you say, "Aha! But I have a nuclear bomb right underneath us."
That's awesome. And
you're not lying.
Can you spend the points like right there to say, "But I went back in time and I did
things
this"?
Like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great. Timewatch. I've not heard of that game.
Yeah. Cool. So it's a time travel game where you're trying to fix things.
And what's a system that you haven't run that you really want to try?
Well, I've played in 2 Alien games and I really like it, and I actually just bought the book, so I want to run.
Nice. I have not tried the new Alien system.
It's fun.
Speaking of body count.
Well, yeah. So it's both times I played it, I felt exactly like a movie. Like one of the movies. So they really embody the feel of it very well with the system. So instead of insanity, they have panic. So you have stress, and then at a certain point you panic, and then they have a random chart. Like when you panic, you wind up shooting everybody and stuff like that. So it's akin to the insanity, except for it's very short term, and it's what happens when you panic. Right.
Right. I like that's a really good mechanic. I like that. Huh? Is it? I'm guessing it's mainly structured around one-shots.
They have 2 versions. Well, it's one rule book, but they say there's a campaign way of running it and a cinematic one. The cinematic is what they mean as a one-shot, and they have a campaign, but I don't know. I'm not sure if you can really do a campaign.
Right. It might be a little one note.
Yeah.
At a certain point.
But maybe you can bring in other stuff so it's more sci-fi. But
right. All right. So it's time for the Space Jam question. Aliens have invaded the Earth. They are going to destroy the Earth unless you, Morgan Waugh, run them a great 4-hour game that they cannot help but be entertained by. So what are you doing for those 4 hours?
So I had this game I built, which is built off of Dread, and it's a cruise ship game, and I would run that one.
Oh, nice. So why would you choose that game?
It's interesting in that there's a mystery, and then it has the Dread mechanic. And I've run it so many times. I sort of found the pacing for Dread, and I know what to do with it. So that I think unless the aliens are really good with digital manipulation, I think it would actually entertain them as much as everybody else.
You know, that you just brought up something to me that's very interesting, which is the advantages of running a one-shot multiple times. You know, because as you run it, you really get a feel for the pace and for where the beats are, and okay, this should happen now, and that sort of thing. It really changes how you run the game.
And you also know where you screwed up before, so you won't do that again.
Yeah. I think that's to me, that's one of my favorite things about con games is getting the opportunity to run the same game several times, because the players will make sure it's not the same game. You know, they will. They will totally mess that up. But you become more and more confident, because so often we spend all this time making these scenarios, and then it's just done. You know.
Yeah. So way back before, I used to run a new scenario every time. But then I ran to Shannon. He goes, "Why are you doing that?" and then he said, "You can run the same one until you get tired of it." I'm like, really? And I thought, oh, so I've done that where I've run some scenarios like through the con circuit, and then I retired. But some people run it until it's not fun anymore. Like, oh, I've seen all the variations by all the players, so there's no point in running this anymore.
Yeah, or if it's a shtick game, like everybody knows the shtick.
Yeah. But I think there is validity in running it until it's not fun anymore, because let's say you're running a convention, 5 to 6 players show up, only those 5 people get to experience it. So you could go back the next year, that's another 6, that's 12. I mean, you could go multiple years for the same game if people line up for it. Like that cruise game, when I ran it at Celesticon, I had like 12 people sign up for it, and I had to turn people away. So, and that was the last time I ran it. So it's pretty clear you could run the game again at the same conventions, because there's also word of mouth. So so one person says, "Oh yeah, this game, they said this is great, I gotta play in it." So there's word of mouth, right?
I mean, honestly, the first time I run a game, there are going to be speed bumps. There are going to be things that don't go right. The more you run it, sort of the more confident you become. And honestly, for me, partly because I don't write a lot down, the more clear the game becomes to me. Like I'm very much, I have a theory that like GM scenario creation is sort of either based on solution backwards or is based on setup. You're either a finale GM or a setup GM, and I am totally set up. I always have a third act problem.
I think I do too. I do the ending, and I figure out the beginning, and then I let them somehow get together. So I'm more of because a lot of the times my idea for scenario is like, I came with some really cool twist or something at the very end. I go, oh, I want them to get there, and then like, okay, where do we start? To somehow head in that direction, but then I let them do whatever they want. Right.
Whereas mine tends to come from, a one sentence idea that is kind of, like the quarantine of San Francisco Chinatown in 1900. That's awesome. That's my setup. And then I'll kind of think of things from there, but I then have to really focus on how's this end? What is where are they going? What are they trying to do? And for me, especially the first time I run a game, that's usually the weakest part.
So I also found there's a difference between writing for a convention and for your friends versus publication. So something that I could, I've spent time on, like, let's say 40 hours of thinking about it and printing characters and stuff. Like for characters, I actually use a spreadsheet and make sure all the skills that are needed are present and there's balance and everything. So I do that. I build the characters. And then also when I build the scenario, I sort of bullet point like different acts and maybe important events and things like that, important NPCs. So that's already there. But like for Dread, I have some set encounters that I need to do to fix the pacing, depending on how things happen. Because in Dread, when the tower goes down, suddenly the tension is released, but then you need to make the tower as unsteady as possible before you hit the next beat.
Yeah, you have to reset the tower. You essentially have to get them to build
because there was one time I played in a Dread game where the tower went down, then we met the big bad right after. It's like, wait, the tower is completely stable. You've messed this up.
Alternatively,
so you need to throw some preset encounters to destabilize the tower before the climactic ending, right?
We played in a Dread game Frank ran that the tower never fell. And so by the end, we were all terrified to even touch anything. It was like one of those beautiful moments where everyone was like, until the very end, the tower didn't go. It was...
So I have preset encounters and all this stuff, but not everything written out. Like they're just bullet points. And a whole scenario could just be, like, a list this long, right? But when you have to write it for publication, then you spend probably another 2 to 6 weeks writing it up, and then you wind up with like a 60-page document, right? Because you have to specify everything. Whereas when you build something for a convention, you already have it in your head and you have the ideas, and then you can just bullet point it and you can fill it out as things happen.
Yeah. It is a you know, like it's a real challenge to write a scenario for another GM.
Yeah.
You know, that is and it's something that I think everybody should try. You know, entering Chaosium, a bunch of other companies have scenario competitions.
Yeah.
And, you know, don't go in it trying to win it. Just go in it trying to write a scenario that someone else can run, because it makes you think about GMing in a totally different way, because you can't shorthand anything. You know, you have to be spelling things out, and I also think it makes you be a lot clearer about what you want the game to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much for taking some time. I really appreciate it. This was a fun conversation. I want to shout out one thing, and that is that Morgan has a blog, and there you can find it there, morganhua.blogspot.com, and it is chock full of GMing tips, especially for Call of Cthulhu, but for other systems as well. Morgan, talk like what made you start writing about kind of gaming in that way?
So initially it was because if you look at the earlier posts, they were about conventions. So the thing was, what happened was I actually played in a game with a GM I played before, which I didn't like. And I said, how did I wind up in this game again? I said, oh, wait, I should keep track of which games I played and write about so I can remember. It was really more for me to remember which GMs I liked and which ones I didn't.
And everyone should have that list. If you go to cons with any regularity, you should have that list of guys that are not going to that game.
So that was the origins. And then I beta tested Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. And then that did that. And then they had then Chaosium sort of had a resurgence. And then they started having a group on Facebook and things. And then people started asking the same questions over and over again. So then I said, so then I started writing articles about Call of Cthulhu with answers. And then I would just point them to the blog post when they asked the same questions again.
Nice. I really enjoy, I mean, I've given how rules light I tend to go, I've learned your combat in 7E post reminded me of some things that I always forget. So yeah, I really
more popular posts.
Yeah. Well, Morgan, thank you so much again. And thank you everybody for watching, for your likes and your subscribes. We really appreciate it. And don't forget to keep the game moving.